Hello, everyone. Dr. Joseph Capps coming back to you again with another episode of our podcast and our YouTube channel, Dancing with the Darkness. Once again, those of you that are listening for the first time, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. This is a raw, unfiltered, real life account of CPTSD, living with CPTSD from a first person point of view, which is mine. And not just all of the negative things that got us to where we are today, but also I want it to be a message of hope, redemption, and ways that you can learn to thrive instead of just survive with this condition. I want you to understand that this isn't, we call it a disorder, which makes it feel like it's permanent. I want you to understand that there is healing that can happen. I want you to know that there is a tremendous purpose in your pain and that you can do a lot of wonderful things based on your experiences and turn these things into something positive and even beautiful. For those of you that are recurring listeners, thank you so much for your support. We can't do this without you. Every time you like, share our videos, and we pick up subscribers, that just simply means that our reach is growing. We are simply doing this as a service to try to help individuals. Turning my own pain into purpose. This is a huge part of that, bearing my soul for the world to see. I have nothing to be ashamed of anymore. I have faced my demons, and here I am, and I'm going to give that gift to you. And hopefully, if there's something in my life or my experiences of what I've gone through or how I've overcome that, if it helps someone in any way, then it's a beautiful and wonderful thing, and that's the only reason that we're here. So I say that in an effort to try to get as much support as we can. The war of the algorithms and all of this stuff that I don't understand with this media simply need your likes and your shares and your comments, especially if it reaches you in a deep way. Please let us know, because it's that affirmation and validation that keeps us going every week. And I say that because I want you to understand that I have tremendous challenges myself still in life, okay? I'm not going to do like all of these gurus and these self-help people and therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists. God, it's innumerable, the resources that are out there, and everybody is promising you this magical cure. The thing is, with CPTSD in particular, a high percentage of us have been misdiagnosed with other conditions. We are getting 10% of the care out of the 90% to 100% care that we should be getting. Those of you that have CPTSD that are listening or watching, I don't have to convince you, because you understand, because you've been through the same thing. And so the purpose of this channel and my ministry and my private practice is the truth. You're going to hear some stuff about a protocol that I've created. It's not mainstream yet, and I think it's because things like this scare people. It scares other therapists and other doctors in particular, because if there's a way to unlock some secrets of a person with CPTSD, it could result in less lucrative things for certain individuals. And that's as far as I'm going to go with that. But I want you to understand that your pain can become purpose. And the number one thing that we need to know, that I've been trying to do with these videos, in the clinical world, we call it psychoeducation. In the spiritual world, we call it discernment. Whatever you want to call it, we need to understand, how did I get here? Who am I really? Who is the real me? Behind the mask, behind the pain, behind the trauma, behind the abuse, who am I really? When we get to that core person that we've been fiercely protecting our entire lives, and we allow that person to come forward and we nurture that person. Some people call it the inner child, they call it the wounded child, they can call it whatever they want. But I really truly believe that this is our soul, the piece of us that God crafted specifically. And this is where moral wounds and all of these things come from, okay? And so we have to address this first, and it can be painful. I don't know if anybody else uses this term or if I have coined the term, but I call it scab picking, because in my mind, with some of my medical training, I think of how a scab will cover up a wound and it gives the appearance that it's healing, but really it's not, because deep inside under the scab is an infection. And we need to understand that that wound has to heal from the inside out if it's a deep wound. And I feel that our moral wounds are the same thing. And we can treat physical wounds and we can treat mental wounds. And, there's pharmacology and there's therapy and there's all of these things. But really, sometimes it's like we're putting a Band-Aid on a wound that really needs a tourniquet. Like we have a major life-ending bleed on our hands, and we're just putting little freaking Band-Aids on it or cotton balls trying to stop this hemorrhage. And we can't do that. And so we have to find the source. If we look at Ayurvedic medicine and naturopathy, which I am a naturopathic practitioner, we see the difference that in medicine we treat symptoms. In Ayurvedic medicine or homeopathy, we're looking for the cause. Well, we have to look for the root cause, and what's interesting is that we'll find that the root cause of physical, mental, and spiritual are all sharing a commonality and a comorbidity. Okay, so a lot of times our physical conditions, our mental conditions are completely and totally in line with our spiritual condition and that moral wound. And so the reason I'm laying this foundation down for you today, and I'm going to go ahead and throw out a trigger warning for those of you that have experienced abuse, which many of you have if you have CPTSD. I'm going to talk about some abuse that I endured. Not graphic necessarily, but I'm going to talk about, we need to understand how we get to where we are, okay? And so I just want to throw that out there. If you're sensitive to this, maybe it's not the time to listen to this video, okay? So I want to talk about, there's a term out there called reactive abuse, and it's getting a lot of traction here lately on both sides of the fence. You have some people that really, really believe in this term reactive abuse, and then you have some people that are like, dude, reactive abuse is garbage. It's just another term for covert abuse or narcissism or whatever. And, they're both right in a way, okay? And so I'm going to give you a first-person point of view of what I feel reactive abuse is in the sense of CPTSD, okay? This is how it shaped and formed my life, okay? And so, whether it's theory, whether it's, hypothesis, whatever, the fact of the matter is that this is my truth that I've lived, and I know that it's true, and what it's done to me. And so I can't help but believe that there's a tremendous amount of commonality in my experiences and yours. And that maybe you just haven't put the pieces together, because, I'm 50 years old, and it took me up until my late 40s to really start putting this jigsaw puzzle together. I really thought that I was healing. I thought that I was doing all of the right things. And honestly, all I was doing was understanding that I had a crap ton of scars that are not completely healed, and I had a lot of scabs that I had picked off, right? And the wound was never really healed, okay? And so that's part of what we have to learn in the discovery phase, is that we have some things that we think we may have addressed, and we don't understand that this really is an onion, and it has many, many layers, okay? And so sometimes we heal this surface layer of the onion, and we don't realize how deep this thing goes. Okay, and so we have to be really conscious of that and understand that there's layers. And one of these wonderful things that our brain does when it's trying to heal and restore itself is it likes to kick these files out that we've repressed or we've disassociated, and it does it at the most inopportune times. You can call them re-experiencing triggers, emotional flashbacks. We've gone over all of those in past videos if you want to know more about that. But the fact of the matter is, we need to understand, especially with CPTSD, the reason they call it complex is because that is a very accurate term. There are a lot of layers to the onion here. And we've talked about a lot of these layers. We've talked about how we show up in relationships. We've talked about why we show up in relationships that way. We've talked about what healing and restoration looks like. And so I want to talk to the individuals today that have probably been in years and years and years of an environment where this term reactive abuse could be used. Okay, I want you to understand the making and the molding of who we become and why we become that. Okay, and so starting with childhood, my childhood anyway, I immediately from the womb was experiencing abuse. I had a mother that was trying to, my father was devout Catholic and she was Catholic, and you couldn't have an abortion, and she really wanted one, but she could, it was this whole thing with religion and everything else. And so she either consciously or subconsciously was trying to abort me by drinking and drugging and doing all of these things. Okay, so miracle number one, premature baby comes out, and for the most part I'm healthy. And if you want more details about this, I talk about it in some of my very first videos. I lay the foundation of how my life came to be. So the point here is that we're already going into a realm of where reactive abuse happens. Okay, so this baby that develops into a child, that develops into an adult, is basically developed and formed and conditioned in this environment. Okay, inconsistency with nurturing and affection, never knowing what you're going to get, whether it's going to be bad or good, and not just minor stuff like extremes. You never knew what was going to happen. Every day was a new day, and it was like, never ask the question, can it get any worse? Or say something like it can't get any worse, because it would. And so our brain, our body, our physiology, everything is developing into this person that is reactive. Okay, we're reactive. We don't know how to respond. We react. We react to everything because we are permanently in the 4F trauma response all of the time. Many of us are in the fawning stage, which is the worst one and the most common one, and you really don't know what the heck to do. Okay, you're not freezing and you're not fight or flight. You're stuck. You're navigating. Do I run? Do I freeze? Do I negotiate? How do I negotiate? By people pleasing. You're just weaving this winding road that leads to nowhere, and this is really part of that crafting of this reactive abuse. And so, what this looks like, and thinking back, it took a long time retrospectively to me to think back of the modeling, just the modeling part of this. Now, I guess when my parents were still trying to be together, maybe they were separated, but they were still, he would come over and whatever. There were many times where the first part of what I'm going to talk about is how the abuser will provoke. Okay, and so out of my mom's mental illness and her issues, which really grafted really well with my father because he had his own issues. Okay, and we've talked about anger before. Well, my dad was the poster child. Everything was anger, rage, anger, rage, everything. He learned as a child that everything had to turn into anger and rage. There was no sadness. There was no other emotion. My grandfather was brutal to him, and he just had to grow up very, very hard, very, very callous. Then he goes to war. War does more of that. Just not a good combination. On the other side, my mother was extremely manipulative, extremely intelligent, and she would mix all of these things. Okay, she was very, very beautiful, and so she would mix sex and all of these things to manipulate the situation and get what she wanted. So she's getting this person's emotions all twisted up. They don't know if they're going east, west, north, south, and so you have a man that he knows nothing but anger, and so she would provoke him and provoke him and provoke him, and then it would end up into either some sort of domestic violence situation. It would end up that I'm in the middle of it and I'm getting my butt kicked, whatever. I'm just thinking back to how that went on. And then it went on subsequently in any other relationship that my mother had. Okay, and this shaped my sexuality. It shaped everything about me because all of it was just a cesspool of sin and sickness and just horrific circumstances. And so I'm being developed into that person, and then we end up in relationships that are very, very similar. And so the first part of that reactive abuse is being with someone, where the abuser knows exactly what buttons to push, and they push them, and then you react. Okay, and so with me, I was a lot like my father, and it would turn into rage. And that rage came from a very deep place. It didn't just come from abuse from my parents. It came from abuse from my siblings. It came from being bullied my entire life. It's just like there was no safe place for me. And I never knew what to do besides fawn and be a victim and allow it to happen until I experienced rage. And rage brought power. It brought endorphins and strength, and you didn't feel pain, and it was intoxicating. It was absolutely intoxicating to look at the wounded person beneath you that you had destroyed. And the reason this was significant for me is because as a child, I make a lot of references to Incredible Hulk, the TV show, and the reason why is because I idolized the Incredible Hulk. So here's mild-mannered Dr. Banner, David Banner. Well, I can associate who I really am inside with David Banner, okay? He was a doctor, and he was caring, and he was loving, and he was sensitive. He was just a good guy, okay? He was a good guy that wanted to help people, and he always ended up in the wrong spot, and somebody had to screw with him, and he begged him. He's like, look, you're not going to like me when I'm angry. Please don't do that. But they provoked, right? So now the big, strong, raw, green man comes out, and he freaking smashes everything. And I remember as a child looking at that, and I fantasized about it. I wanted to be that green man. I wanted to rip my clothes off and turn into this big green thing, and I wanted revenge. I wanted to strike back. I wanted to have the ability to just destroy my persecutors. And that was a fantasy. I dreamed about it. I wanted it so bad because I was desperate, absolutely desperate to have help in some way, and I never could get it. My generation, if you went to your parent, especially my parent, I'm going to get it even worse, okay? So there was no one, okay? And so we grow up, and we have repressed and dissociated and done all of that, and we have all of that living inside of us, and then we get into relationships where it's perfectly natural for us. This is what we're used to navigating. We think that this is normal. We think that it's healthy, and so now we're in a relationship where we're getting provoked again. And, then you punch through the wall or you smash something, and this person may not be doing it on purpose because they have their own mental illness and their own trauma, but it's a sense of they need you to reach your breaking point so that they have a level of control. Whatever insecurity that they have, whatever lack of control they feel that they have, they feel like if I can get this guy to his breaking point, now I am the guy or gal controlling the marionette, right? I'm the puppeteer. And so we need to understand that. A lot of times what we see is when you lose control, it's almost like you may even see them smile or smirk a little bit like, I've got you now, right? I've got you. And the point of this is whatever they've done to provoke you, whatever they've said, whatever behaviors that they've done that make them guilty, they are now exonerated from that because you have lost your shit. Excuse my language, but you have lost it, and you've done something really stupid. Whether it's say something you wish you didn't say or smashed something you didn't smash. You would have thought the third time that I broke my freaking hand, I would have learned don't hit the damn walls anymore, but you never do, right? So instead of that, you end up with these really, really hard hands that are scarred with calluses and whatever else. And that's a great external application and visual of what happens to the inside of us as well. Okay. And we can get to the point, if we're not careful, that you lose your humanity completely. And that's where we see our sociopaths and all of these other things, these psychopaths that, they have an acute psychotic break and they lose that part of themselves. And if you're a faith believing person like myself, I believe that it's a tremendous gateway for demonic influence and darkness. And I have run into people in my life that I know without a shadow of a doubt that their soul was not there anymore. Okay, gives me chills. Right now I'm getting chills thinking about it because I know that there was nothing that. I think about some movies that have made and molded me, my whole life, and they were meant to be terror, but yet they have actually made me who I am. They've given me great discernment, and I can almost recite the movie The Exorcist, and I can almost recite the movie Jaws. Those two movies, which I was forced to watch at an early age in an effort to psychologically torture me, for years mentally disturbed me, and I had to master my fear, and I became completely and totally fascinated with sharks and with demonic possession and oppression. And that's how I overcame that, was I had to beat it. Okay, so we're talking about the psychoeducation and the discernment. I needed to know what my enemy was, and I needed to know how to overcome it. And so that's why those things have made and molded me. But I think of some of the lines just from Jaws, and he's talking about when he was on the Indianapolis and the sailors were being eaten by the sharks, and he was talking about how the shark came up and that there was no soul there, that it just had these black eyes and it just chomped you and ate you up. And that's what happens to us. That darkness just eats us up until there's nothing there. So these lines like that in these movies, there's lines, like in The Exorcist, where it talks about how the devil mixes lies with the truth. Also very applicable here, because we end up in these relationships where lies are mixed with the truth. Okay, so we go off of that first part where we've reacted, we've done something stupid. Now we're the one who's wrong, and now we have this shame and guilt. And this shame and guilt already lives there because we have been made and formed and conditioned off of this shame and guilt. Every time we were abused, it was our fault because we're a piece of crap. We're just a stupid kid. We're just not good enough, okay? So we're carrying around all this false shame and guilt anyway. So now we're in a relationship and we react to getting our buttons pushed. We get pushed to our limits, and now we do something. So now this person is exonerated by everything that they did wrong. We're the bad guy. And so now we find ourselves carrying this horrific shame and guilt. And it's not about them forgiving us at this point, because we're trying to figure out how to forgive ourselves, because we don't want to get to that place. We don't want to get to that place where we lose it. It's a painful place. It is exhausting physically, mentally, and spiritually to experience this breaking point, and then trying to come down off of that with the adrenal fatigue. It is unbelievably taxing on the human body. And so now we have this shame and guilt, and now we find ourselves apologizing. Not just apologizing, but we are just doing everything we can to win back the affirmation, to win back the affection, to get what, to restore whatever we had with this person. And so this becomes a very, very unhealthy cycle. And so we need to understand that this is just one of the many parts of this reactive abuse. So then we spiral into the other things that we've talked about with the covert narcissism and, the gaslighting and getting to this point where we start questioning ourselves. And so now I don't know what I'm capable of. I don't know what I'm not capable of. Now I start to to doubt my own emotions, my own feelings. Now I'm afraid of myself. I'm afraid of, how far will I go with my anger? It's a horrific experience because it's really like a deep-rooted cancer that's eating us from the inside out. And so we end up getting to this point. If we keep going in this environment, we get to this point where we have tremendous emotional dysregulation. We have emotional immaturity. We just really don't know how to navigate relationships at all. We don't really know how to navigate the world. We can get to this point of brokenness where you just can't trust anyone. You can't trust anyone, including yourself. Okay, and I really do believe that this is the final stage where we get to that point where the darkness really gets a foothold and it can consume us, and we have this hopelessness. There is no solution to our problem. And that's why they call the taking of one's life, they call it a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And the reason why is because we think these problems are not fixable, that there is absolutely no hope. And so that's where we have to understand and educate ourselves. How did we get there? What does this reactive abuse look like? And what do we do about it? And so I want to we're 25 minutes into this video, and I want to share a little bit of how do we restore out of this, okay? Because we can't just have a video that gets you all stirred up in the feels and you're like, oh, thanks for telling me what I already know. Now what? Okay, right? I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. I have this tremendous identifying emotional experience, and then they're like, hey, have a nice day. We'll see you next time. And you're off to the world again. So I want to tell you what I've had to do. And I'm hoping that some of these things will help you. So number one, we talked about already. We need to understand. As painful as it is, we have to look back, and we need to understand that there were sick people that never had a chance to heal or never made the choice to heal. And they decided to be our parents, okay, by whatever fate there was. And that we ended up who we are based on genetics and temperament and all of these other things. Okay, so we've talked about it before, 52% of it we can't change. It's genetic and it's temperament. The other 48% we can absolutely modify and change, and it can make for a much better life for you. Okay, and so we need to understand that we are a product of many, many things. And until we do that, until we look in the mirror and we understand that there's a level of accountability that we have, because we have to make our own decisions, there is a tremendous amount of things that made us who we are that we are not accountable for. Okay? Now, with that being said, I'm not saying that this gives you any excuses. This is what has happened to society, and this is why people are not resilient and why they are not healing. It's because we make excuses. Okay? Well, little Johnny got smacked, so little Johnny smacked Rosie. And it's okay that Rosie smacked little Mary because little Johnny smacked her. Okay, it's a chain of events, and we can't do that. We have to get to a point where we say, hey, look, I acknowledge your pain. I acknowledge what happened to you, and it's awful. But that still does not give you the excuse to hurt someone else. Okay? So it's a twofold thing that's very difficult. We have to acknowledge what made us who we are, but we also have to take extreme ownership of ourselves and take control. Because by taking control, we learn to stop reacting and we learn to respond. Okay? There's a big difference. We react primally, instinctually, like an animal, because inherently we are animals. Responding takes a little bit of effort, okay? It causes us, we have to breathe. We have to think before we act. That is a response. And if you are still in a reactive state, vacate. Do whatever you can to leave the situation, to calm down, to think, to ponder before you react. Because responding is going to do a couple things. It's going to make you feel better about yourself. It's going to eliminate that false shame and guilt that gets put on you by the other person. And quite frankly, this person that may be abusing you or may be playing this game with you mentally, physically, and spiritually, it's going to drive them insane because they have now lost control and they don't know what to do. Okay? So it's going to help you discover deeply whether or not you're in a relationship that is toxic or debilitating or unhealthy. And it's going to give you the ability to look at that from the outside and say, hey, you know what? I not only don't want to be treated the way I'm being treated, but I don't want to react. I don't want to be that person that loses their crap and gets violent or smashes something or says something stupid. Okay? You know what? It's hard, but you have the power to make these decisions. I promise you, because I've had to make these decisions. I've had to make these decisions in relationships. I've had to make these decisions in workplaces. And it's hard, but it can happen. You can get to a point where you can create healthy boundaries with people and you can command respect. They may not like you, and we need to get over that. We need to get over the fact that not everybody's going to like us, and that's fine. Because if you're healthy and it's unhealthy people that don't like you, guess what? That's not a bad thing, because we do not want to be around the unhealthy. I'm sorry if this is like you're saying, hey, dude, you're full of crap, That's fine. Last year even, I might have looked at my own video and said, dude, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. But I'm telling you, it's real. You got to create boundaries. You've got to command respect. Respect is way more valuable than somebody liking you, because respect is a lot deeper. Okay? And this is what we want. This is how we create new relationships, healthy relationships. Okay? And you're going to find that, honestly, those of us with CPTSD, we don't need a bunch of relationships. We think that we need to be popular and we need to be liked and affirmed. You're going to get to a point where you're going to realize, if I have one or two people that I allow in to really see who I am, and they embrace that and they cherish that and they love that and they help protect that, I'm good. Surface relationships, whatever, that's fine, because as you heal, you're gonna start showing these wonderful positive attributes that come from CPTSD. We're empathic, we're caring, we're concerned, we want to help people, we don't want people to suffer. We have a level of resilience and fortitude, believe it or not, that no one else in this world has. We think that we're weak and we think that we're all these things, but we're some of the strongest people in the world. We're like that old saying, the cockroach survived the nuclear war. Well, we're like that. And you start discovering that about yourself, and you start realizing that the impact that you can have on the world is going to be based on those positive attributes, not the negative things that made you who you are. Because you bring reliability, and you bring integrity and honesty, okay, and selflessness. You bring that into the world, and that's a rarity, okay? And so if people are going to find a diamond in the rough and really appreciate that diamond, then they're worth being part of your life. But if they're like everybody else and they're still digging in the mud, it's okay to let those people go. Okay? So we got to know who we are. We've got to start creating some boundaries. And these boundaries aren't just protecting you, they're protecting the people around you. Because remember, you don't want to be Hulk smash, right? As good as it feels, you don't want to be that person, okay? Because you're losing control. And so we start to gain control of ourselves, okay? So educate yourself. Start creating some boundaries. Start realizing what you have control over, okay? These are some good spots for us to stop, because I don't want to overwhelm you. These are the critical aspects. If you do these couple things, then we can move forward in a major way with your healing journey, just as I have, because it only gets better from there. You're going to continue to discover things. You're going to continue to peel back layers of the onion. You're going to have memories come back. You're going to have a lot of things come back. But instead of it becoming an emotional flashback or a trigger or something that's going to harm you, we can turn these things into something amazing, okay? So like I've told you in past videos, if you have a nightmare or if something during the day causes you to have a visceral reaction, journal it, write it down, and then when you're calm and you can look retrospectively at the situation, sit down and read it again. And you'll notice that we can start processing these things, that little things start piecing together, and the puzzle starts to complete itself, and we start to understand who we are, how we got there, but most importantly, we understand that tomorrow can be a brand new day. Tomorrow, we can show up in the world as a totally different person. And we can continue to do that, that life is not over, that this isn't permanent, that we don't have to just sit here and wait to die or for life to be a prison sentence. There's a lot of life still left in you. There's a lot of goodness still left in you. And there's an unbelievable ability for you to help other people, because the ones that don't get help out there are the ones that are broken, because they don't trust, they're afraid, and quite honestly, this world has become way less compassionate. So you could have an amazing ministry and an amazing testimony by turning your pain into purpose, just like I'm trying to do with my life. So I want you to understand that this is a message of hope. I'd ask you today, if this reached you in any kind of way, even if it's negative, even if I just made you mad, please comment. I will address your comments. Please like and share if you feel like this is something that can help someone else. I want to thank you so much for our return listeners. Once again, we can't do this without you. And until we meet next time for next week, I'm praying for each and every one of you out there for this audience. God bless, and we'll see you soon.